Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Our topic today is processed foods, why they're so bad for us, efforts that are being made to make them healthier, and whether those changes are going to make much of a difference. My guest is processed foods expert, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Michael Moss, author of the bestsellers Salt, Sugar, Fat, and Hooked. Michael, great to see you again.
Good to be back with you, Lori.
So for sort of like a backgrounder, we've heard so much about HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy talking about, the dangers of the food supply, the dangers of the food that we're eating. But honestly, this is something that you've been talking about and bringing to our attention for many, many years. For those who aren't aware, take us back to how you took that deep dive. You almost went undercover to these major food manufacturers so long ago. And what did you find at that time?
Yeah, and not only, but I've been writing about it, but the industry itself has been aware and concerned about the impact it's having on people's health for years and years. I mean, I started the first book I wrote, Salt, Sugar, Fat, with this secret meeting, gathering of the heads of the largest processed food companies in North America, who were brought together by a cabal of insiders in their companies who are becoming alarmed about their increasing culpability in not just obesity, but diabetes and other sort of chronic diseases, even some types of cancers. And they were urging their bosses, the CEOs, to do something to turn themselves around and be more responsive to the health consequences of their products. And what's kind of remarkable about the meeting is, one, the CEO said basically, forget about it. I mean, we are beholden to stockholders and Wall Street as much as we are to consumers. But B, it's like that happened back in 1999 when those chronic health diseases that are associated with eating too much processed food were just kind of getting underway. And not much has changed since that time, Laura, in terms of the industry's sort of attitude about the health consequences and their kind of inability to kind of move in a positive direction that might help us out.
Talk about I know that we could go on for hours about this, but just the highlights about why processed food is so unhealthy. Why does it make us have all these diseases?
I focused on kind of their three main ingredients, which make the foods luscious and irresistible, salt and sugar and fat. And they have working for them chemists and marketing people who are working 24/7 to get us to not just like their products, but to want more and more of them. Salt, they call the flavor burst, because it's typically the first thing that touches the tongue, especially when you're eating snacks, sends that signal to the reward center of the brain, which goes, wow, I love that. Let's have more. Sugar, they call the bliss point because they work up formulas. They call this food engineering to achieve the perfect amount of sweetness in products, not too little, not too much. And the problem, as nutritionists see it, is not that they've engineered bliss points for sweetness for things like ice cream and cookies and soda, things we know should be sweet or know will be sweet. They've marched around the store adding sugar, engineering bliss points to things that never used to be sweet before. So now bread has added sugar and a bliss point for sweetness. Yogurt came to have as much sugar, per serving as ice cream. And, one of my favorite spots in the grocery store aisle is the spaghetti sauce area where some of the brands came to have the equivalent of a couple of Oreo cookies worth of sugar in a tiny half cup serving, which arguably kind of taught us to expect sugar and sweetness in everything we eat. So when we drag ourselves over to that tiny part of the grocery store that's selling the stuff that every nutritionist says we should be eating more of, produce, right? Vegetables, and we get some of those other basic flavors, sour and bitter, our brain is rebelling and pulling us back to the center of the store where the sugar things are. And then there's fat, which is loaded with calories. It provides what the industry calls the mouthfeel, that luscious sensation of biting into a toasted cheese sandwich, which also makes their products irresistible. And together, those three things are kind of the dominant factor as to why we overeat. Although there's other things, there's color and there's sound and there's there's the crispiness and of course the marketing, right? They spend a lot of time, um, you know, a lot of money getting us at a very early age to adopt eating habits that focus on their products, and those eating habits then stay with us for life. And these products live in our heads as memories.
So let's fast forward to today with our new HHS secretary saying, I'm going to take on these food manufacturers. What was your initial reaction to that?
I mean, my initial reaction was great. I mean, it sounds nice. We kind of heard that before from, Michelle Obama, the first lady, made childhood obesity and processed food kind of her mission. But she ran into trouble, and I think that Robert Kennedy Jr. immediately sort of ran into trouble too, which is that one has to understand just how powerful this industry is in the economy, in creating jobs. I mean, Michelle Obama's husband in the White House was dealing with economic trouble, and all the industry had to do was whisper to him about the incredible hit the economy would take if he allowed his wife to sort of mess around with their product formulas and sales. And I think that probably much the same could be going on right now, too, where you have the HHS secretary leading the charge to try to do something that would change the impact of these products. But then you've got the economic advisors in the White House going, "Hey, wait a minute, this is a humongous industry. Do we really want to be messing around with it?"
And then what we see lately is, a teeny tiny little change, which is what you just mentioned a moment ago, the color. And we're
Yeah.
seeing some of these companies saying that they're going to get rid of certain of these artificial dyes. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there is some concern that for some people, especially children, artificial dyes can create sort of a reaction, a hyperactivity. In the scheme of things, I don't think it's the most important thing we need to worry about these products. And taking artificial dyes out of Skittles is still going to leave you with Skittles. And so, I mean, one of my concerns is that what if that puts sort of a halo of health on Skittles now that they have something other than artificial dyes? Are people going to mistakenly think that this is something really good to eat? So I think, hats off to the administration for trying something, but again, in the scheme of things, I don't think it's the biggest thing they could be going after.
And you talk about marketing, they're just precision marketing. I just couldn't help but notice that Heinz announced that they're getting rid of the artificial dyes, and then right on the heels of that, started marketing their ketchup for breakfast, and the bottle looks like a syrup container. Did you happen to notice that? And if so, what was your reaction to it?
Well, I didn't, but my reaction would be it may be as sweet as syrup. I mean, if you look at some of the big brand, tomato sauces, they have a fair amount of added sugar to them for kind of for industrial reasons because they're using tomatoes that aren't sort of naturally sweet. So in one sense, I think it kind of makes sense. It's almost like selling cereal as candy, which you also see from the companies, or as afternoon snack, not a breakfast cereal, because the cereals are as sweet as candy. So why not call them what they are? It's kind of ironic.
It makes me think that so much of the artificial dye talk is the easiest thing to remove, but has a great marketing impact because it gives the appearance that these foods are healthy.
Absolutely, and I think that was my sort of first concern I had about it. It's so powerful, Lori. I mean, that's why the soda companies spend gobs of money trying to get what they call pouring rights in sports venues, knowing that if they can get their soda in the hands of a kid when he or she is with their parents having the time of their lives, that soda will forevermore be associated with joy and happiness, kind of get stuck in your head as a memory. So 40 years later, you could be having a moment of unhappiness and get that feeling of, hey, what's going to solve this problem in my life? Oh, I'll just have this soda again. So the marketing aspects of processed foods is huge, especially when you think about how there's almost no marketing for the things we should be eating more of, for broccoli and celery and apples and maybe a little bit on pineapples, but and avocados. But other than that, um, all of the marketing goes to the center of the store where the highly processed food is, and we should be aware of it, and as opposed to being attracted to it by the huge marketing campaigns.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a break and be right back with Michael Moss. The books are called Salt, Sugar, Fat, and Hooked. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We're talking about processed foods with Michael Moss, author of the bestsellers Hooked and Salt, Sugar, Fat. So, Michael, before the break, you were saying, getting rid of the artificial dyes is good, but really doesn't have much teeth, no pun intended. What do you think about this push now to put warning labels on processed foods, sort of like we see on cigarettes?
It's interesting that there's a parallel to cigarettes there because, as I wrote in Salt, Sugar, Fat, for so many years, the single largest manufacturer of processed food in North America was none other than the largest cigarette maker, Philip Morris. And the parallels between these two industries are really important to kind of understand if you want to know why it is we're so hooked on these products and find it so difficult to escape them and rebalance our eating habits. The warning labels, that I think the issue with that is that, the government has been warning us about processed food and overeating it for years and years and years. And at the same time, it's been urging us to eat more fruits and vegetables for years and years with kind of almost no consequence. And I think that the solution to really sort of help people change their eating habits has got to go beyond that. I mean, part of the problem is economics. If you're somebody walking in the grocery store meaning to do right by yourself, by your family, you're confronted with this huge disparity in price where, a pint of blueberries can cost as much as a 2 pound, three meat, four cheese frozen pizza. It's going to feed the whole family. And so if you're constrained, your food budget is tight, what are you going to do? Which are you going to pick? And so that's one of the big issues, is why things that are good for us, produce, aren't more affordable, and why processed food, in the scheme of things, relativity, um, is more affordable and more attractive.
What would happen to processed foods if the manufacturers actually did cut back on the sugar, salt, and fat?
They have told me that, look, if they really did it cold turkey, sales would plunge because after all this time of encouraging us to eat sweet foods, it's going to take some time to kind of move us off our loving for sweetness. That's a valid kind of defense on their part, overlooking the fact that they're the ones who kind of established that love of sweetness that we have, or certainly pushed it to the extent it is now. So I think what you find the companies, the smarter companies, more well-meaning ones, doing is practicing what they call kind of stealth reformulation, where they're quietly, gradually changing the formula to reduce the amounts of salt and sugar and fat in their products without diminishing the allure of those products. But that's kind of the catch, too, because it's not just kind of what's in these products that may be causing trouble for us. It's that they fill us up and we don't eat the things we should be eating. It's, again, the fruits and the vegetables and the whole foods and the grains and what have you. So it's almost like what's not in these products is really important to think about as much as what's in them.
Isn't it just unrealistic to think that these products, just by their very nature, can be healthy?
There's just this price we pay for convenience. And that's kind of what's really going on. And that's how I kind of define ultra processed foods is, go in the grocery store, and the easier it is to kind of pick a food product off the shelf, throw it in your basket, take it home, put it on the shelf, let it sit there forever, and then warm it up on the stove or what have you. The easier that is, the higher the price we pay for these hidden health consequences of overeating foods like that. So yeah, it does seem to be something the price we pay. Look, if I was emperor for a day, I would start with kids. I would put a garden in every school in the country, not just to grow food for the lunch program, but to get kids excited about things they might not be familiar with, radishes and even things like strawberries, and start with that next generation on the notion that creating good eating habits is harder than fixing bad habits.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take another break and be right back with Michael Moss. The books are called Salt, Sugar, Fat, and Hooked. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We are talking with Michael Moss, author of the books Salt, Sugar, Fat, and Hooked. And we're talking about some of these sort of small changes that some of these companies are making, and they're really playing them up to give the illusion that their foods are now healthy. We talked about the artificial dyes, and also we've been hearing a lot lately about beef tallow. Some of these restaurants like Steak and Shake are like, oh, we're frying in beef tallow now, so our food is healthy. What's your reaction?
Well, it's really getting harder to kind of figure out what's good for you and what's bad. I mean, the big food manufacturers, are putting their best foot forward and putting something on the label like less sugar, less fat, and pretending to make products that are healthier for us. And then you have things like that. Yeah, shifting ingredients from like sugarcane to corn sugar or back to sugarcane sugar, or in this case, swapping seed oils for beef fat, again, providing the same mouthfeel, the same luscious allure, but on this kind of notion that isn't very well grounded in science that beef tallow could be better for you than seed oils. And one of the most difficult things out there now is that there are advocates for every little aspect and variation on nutrition and food ingredients, and it's just so hard for the average person to kind of sort that out and figure out who to listen to.
You know, these parents are just trying to buy healthy, and if they're in the store and they see something like, hey, no more artificial dyes, they think that's healthy. What's your advice to parents?
Kind of work on developing. What we did with our kids was, instead of saying no, don't drink that soda, or we more kind of concentrated on just giving them good things to eat, on the notion that if you serve plain steamed broccoli to your kids 20 times, by the 21st time, they may actually like it. And it worked in our family. My boys are now 25 and 20. And I tell you, even today, they come over and they're asking for plain steamed broccoli. So I think that it's easier than the companies maybe pretend it is for us to help our families develop better eating habits. And the other thing too is just kind of try to maybe do a little more cooking from scratch and start with really simple things, because that kind of takes back the power of your eating habits for yourself. I mean, I have a recipe for spaghetti sauce that takes 90 seconds. And granted, if it simmers on the stove for a while, the family's more apt to sort of really love it. But still, the basic energy going into cooking it is 90 seconds, and then I can control the salt, sugar, fat, and the other ingredients, that actually cost less than store bought too. So I think the industry has created this myth of convenience, and hyped it to the point where a lot of us are scared to do even some basic cooking that could be really good for us in changing our overall eating health.
Great advice. All right, we're going to take one final break and be right back with Michael Moss talking about processed foods. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We're talking about processed foods with Michael Moss. And so, Michael, when we hear about our HHS Secretary, RFK Jr., talking about fixing the food supply, it seems kind of like a daunting task, right?
Yeah, daunting, and frankly, I think he's at the wrong agency, because the vast power to regulate and change our eating habits lies not at HHS, Department of Health and Human Services. It lies with the Agriculture Department, because that's where you find, the power to make good food or bad food affordable, and the marketing efforts, et cetera. And by and large, the agriculture department is controlled and dominated by this handful of processed food companies. So it's almost like he got appointed to like the wrong corner of government. And that ag department is hugely sensitive to the economic power that the industry has
And
and the hold that it has over the budget and the GDP.
and do you think it would harm the farmers if major changes were made in the ag department?
I mean, I know farmers who, for generations were selling or growing field corn and soybeans as ingredients for the processed food, who have switched sides and are now growing row crops and vegetables and fruits and having the time of their lives. It's harder to do, but yeah, I think that with, a big effort, we could convert and help encourage them to convert the farming to growing more of those crops that more and more people should be eating more of.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Can you tell our viewers where they can find out more about you, Michael?
Oh, I have a website actually called mossbooks.us. My email is in there, and I'd love to hear from anybody if anyone has any thoughts or questions.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your years and years of fabulous work uncovering this behemoth, which is the processed food industry. We so appreciate your time today and your lifetime of work as well.
And thanks for your work, Lori.
Thank you. All right. And thanks to you for tuning into this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson, and we'll see you again next week.